Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world.
And today, we are looking at a really massive one.
We really are. I am so thrilled you are joining us today, you listening, because we are taking a deep dive into a concept that it fundamentally rewrites how you, me, and literally everyone else interacts with reality itself.
Yeah, it's not a small topic today.
No, not at all. Today's deep dive explores the new digital age. This is a book by Eric Schmidt, the former CEO and executive chairman of Google, and Jared Cohen, the director of Google Ideas. And the mission for this deep dive, the thing we really want you to keep in mind, is that we are examining how entire societies now live simultaneously in two worlds.
Right, a physical one and a digital one.
Exactly. A physical world shaped by geography and institutions, and a digital world shaped by networks and code. And the driving question we have for you today is, when power flows through both of these worlds at once, who actually governs reality?
Which is, it's such a crucial question. And to give a little context on the source material here, Schmidt and Cohen, they are not treating technology as just a neutral set of tools.
Right.
They aren't looking at phones or websites and saying, oh, these are just neat gadgets. They describe a complete structural transformation in how information flows and how our institutions actually operate.
Yeah, and that brings us to the core thesis of the show, the actual crisis in perception here, because I think many people still view the internet as just a collection of apps, a place to check email or watch videos.
Right, a utility.
Exactly, a utility. But the big aha moment of this book is realizing that digital networks now function as a global social operating system.
Absolutely. And when you realize that, you see that power isn't disappearing at all, it's just being redistributed. The authors frame the internet as the largest experiment involving anarchy in human history.
Which is a wild way to think about it.
Yeah, it is. Because it's bound by no terrestrial laws, it has no central government, yet it interacts intimately with our highly regulated physical reality.
Yeah, it's this massive ungoverned space right on top of our governed space. Before we really get into the weeds of this, just a quick bit of housekeeping for you listening. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time and research behind Crisis and Perception, you can support us via Patreon.
And you can also check out the mini explainer linked in the description below.
Yep, and if you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please subscribe and comment with what you'd like us to explore next. So let's jump right into Section 1, the infrastructure of reality and this crazy acceleration of scale.
Yeah, the scale is where we have to start. Because you have to look at the evolution of the internet to understand this. We went from room-sized computers transmitting basic text to suddenly having this omnipresent outlet for human energy.
Right, and it's driven by these relentless technological laws. The book leans heavily on Moore's law, which is this idea that processor chips double in speed and capability roughly every 18 months.
And then you combine that with the law of photonics.
Yes. The fiber optic side.
Exactly, where the amount of data you can push through a fiber optic cable is doubling roughly every 9 months. When you compound those two things over decades, the acceleration is almost impossible for the human brain to intuitively grasp.
It really is. And the authors make this projection that is just staggering. They project that by 2025, the vast majority of the world's population will go from having essentially no unfiltered information to suddenly accessing all of the world's information right in the palms of their hands.
And that shift, going from information scarcity to absolute abundance, it fundamentally breaks the old top-down institutional control.
Because the gatekeepers are gone.
Right. For centuries, if you wanted to reach 1 million people, you needed a printing press, a broadcast tower, or the blessing of a state censor. Now, individuals can publish and organize globally with almost zero friction.
And what's fascinating here is how scale actually changes the nature of reality. Like a difference in degree, meaning just the raw speed of your connection, eventually becomes a difference in kind. It changes the very nature of human interaction.
It does. 1 million people connected as a network, 5 billion people connected continuously as a parallel civilization.
Yeah. And the authors use these sci-fi comparisons to try and illustrate where this is going. I mean, I want you listening to imagine this. They talk about something akin to a Star Trek holodeck.
Oh yeah, the virtual environments.
Right. A system that can project a perfect beach landscape into your room or recreate a live Elvis performance in your living space. Or they talk about fleets of driverless cars and augmented reality overlays on your glasses.
And those overlays blur the line completely. You're walking down a physical street governed by physical laws, but your eyes are seeing a digital layer governed by code.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it's really easy to hear about augmented reality and driverless cars and think, well, that's just a luxury for the rich in Silicon Valley. But the authors argue the exact opposite.
They absolutely do. The most profound changes aren't happening in the developed world.
Exactly. So let's pivot to what this means for the billions of people in the developing world who are just coming online right now.
And this brings up the concept of leapfrogging, which is probably one of the most important economic dynamics happening today. Developing nations are completely bypassing the old technologies.
Right, they aren't digging trenches to lay copper landlines or setting up slow dial-up modems.
No, they are leaping straight from zero connectivity to high-speed wireless networks.
And the specific anecdote the authors share about this is brilliant. They talk about these Congolese fisherwomen. For generations, their reality was totally constrained by physical limitations.
Heat and time.
Exactly. You catch a fish, you take it to a physical market, and the clock starts ticking. If you don't sell it fast, it spoils. And to fix that physically, you need massive infrastructure. Refrigeration, reliable electricity, night guards.
Which they obviously don't have.
Right, they don't have those formal market economies. But then they leapfrog. They get basic mobile phones. And suddenly they don't take the fish out of the river.
They leave it tethered in the water to keep it alive.
Yes. They keep it alive in the river, and they only pull it out when a buyer actually calls them on the phone and places an order.
It's amazing because the connectivity literally becomes the infrastructure. For people living the lives of their grandparents, dealing with low life expectancy and stalled economies, a mobile phone is not a gadget. It is a direct replacement for broken or non-existent government services.
It's replacing the entire cold chain logistics industry with a Nokia brick phone.
Exactly. And we see this in healthcare too, the mobile health revolution.
Oh yeah, SMS tracking.
Right, using text messages to track anti-malarial drugs or verify counterfeit medicines, or look at education. If kids can't safely attend a physical school because it's a conflict zone, they use interactive voice response, IVR, to get their lessons. The infrastructure moves from the physical world, where it can be bombed, to the virtual world.
And this sparks what the book calls the data revolution, which has a massive impact on traditional authority, because suddenly isolated populations can fact-check their leaders.
Yes, the epistemological monopoly is broken.
The authors give this example of a Malawian witch doctor who suddenly has to face a newly informed public. His patients can literally pull out a phone and cross-reference his medical claims.
Or the youth in Yemen. They get online and see that the rest of the world condemns tribal practices like child brides. And that online consensus gives them the psychological and informational backing to challenge their physical tribal elders.
It completely disrupts the hierarchy, and it empowers the individual in ways that were geographically impossible before. You mentioned the Maasai earlier in our notes.
Oh, the cattle herder in the Serengeti.
Yeah, explain that one, because it really highlights the linguistic adaptability of these networks.
So you have a Maasai cattle herder, and his native tongue is Ma, which is an unwritten language. In the past, he was entirely cut off from the global economy. But now, he can use voice recognition technology specifically tailored to his unwritten dialect. He speaks into his phone to check market prices for his cattle in the capital, or to crowdsource where local predator lions are.
It's just phenomenal. And it scales up globally with platforms like Amazon Mechanical Turk. Individuals can totally bypass their stagnant local economies and participate in a global market by doing digital tasks.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, we have to look at the cost. The empowerment of the individual is incredible. But what happens when participating in this economy requires a permanent digital footprint?
And that takes us right into Section 3, the future of identity. Because when the virtual supersedes the physical, the rules of who you are completely change.
Historically, your identity was forged offline. You built a reputation in your physical community, and maybe you projected a tiny slice of that online.
But the authors argue that in the future, that completely inverts. Your identity is going to be fashioned online and then experienced offline.
Yes, the digital past will dictate the physical future.
And this leads to their concept of the official profile. Because if you think about it, governments are going to find millions of anonymous, hidden people to be way too risky. They predict that states will require verification that ties a physical, flesh and blood person to their Netflix, their Facebook, their bank, their news accounts.
Which sounds incredibly invasive, but the authors explain the sheer cost of anonymity in this system. Even if it's not mandated by law,
Sure.
unverified profiles will be ranked so low in search algorithms that they essentially become invisible.
You just get filtered out as spam.
Exactly. If you
Right.
want a loan, if you want a job, if you want anyone to read your article, you have to be verified. As they put it, to be anonymous is to be irrelevant.
To be anonymous is to be irrelevant. That is such a heavy phrase. And because everything is stored in the cloud, there is a permanence to this data. We literally are what we tweet.
Which is terrifying because humans make mistakes. But digital data doesn't forget.
Right. And because of that permanence, the authors predict these fascinating kind of dystopian new industries popping up. They talk about identity managers becoming as common as financial planners.
You pay someone to manage your 401k. Why wouldn't you pay an expert to curate your search results?
Exactly. Because your search results might determine if you get hired. They even suggest parents will start buying reputation insurance policies.
That one blew my mind.
I know. Imagine buying an insurance policy against the damage caused by a mistake your kid makes online at age 14, because you know that mistake will still be searchable when they are 30 and applying for a mortgage.
So what happens to privacy in that world?
That's the thing. A new social contract emerges. We are basically agreeing to give up our privacy and our security in the physical world to gain all these incredible benefits and economic empowerment in the virtual world.
We trade obscurity for utility.
We do. And if individuals are having to navigate these two overlapping worlds, states and governments are doing the exact same thing, but with much, much higher stakes.
Which brings us to the architecture of state power.
Right, Section 4. Because to understand state power in the digital age, you have to realize that the internet is a highly physical thing.
This is a huge misconception. People talk about the cloud like it's magic floating in the sky.
Yeah.
It's not a cloud. It is a network of flora and fauna, basically websites and software running on deeply physical infrastructure.
Fiber optic cables on the ocean floor, copper wires in the ground, massive physical routers and server farms that need actual water and electricity.
And because that infrastructure sits inside geographic borders, states control the physical entry and exit points. And that means they retain immense power.
Absolutely. They can physically sever the connection. And because of this, governments are going to have to practice two completely different versions of domestic and foreign policy.
Right, one physical, one virtual. You might have a country that maintains perfect physical peace with its neighbor. They trade, they shake hands at summits, while simultaneously waging an aggressive, destructive war against their power grid in cyberspace.
Now, I want to pause here for a quick rule check for you listening. As we discuss these next examples regarding internal state control, we are impartially reporting the historical and hypothetical scenarios that the authors provide in the text. We aren't taking a side here, just laying out how the authors see this network manipulation playing out.
And one of the most striking concepts they introduce is digital apartheid, or electronic isolation.
Yes, manipulating the network architecture to segregate populations.
They give a hypothetical example of a kosher internet. Imagine ultra-Orthodox groups in Israel lobbying for a completely separate, heavily filtered internet infrastructure that only allows pre-approved content.
Right, and if they have the political power, they enforce a different reality on the network level. The authors also pose a hypothetical involving the Romanian government and the Roma minority.
Right, if a government wants to oppress a minority group in the physical world, they have to send in police, which causes international outrage.
But in the digital world, the state can hypothetically throttle internet access, specifically in Roma neighborhoods. They can degrade the signal, block financial portals, and basically harass them into economic ruin.
And they do it with complete, plausible deniability. They just blame a router malfunction.
And regimes can also offer this sort of devil's bargain to their citizens. They say, look, we will give you blazing fast 5G, subsidized smartphones, the best infrastructure in the world, but you have to trade away your privacy. You give us full surveillance access in exchange for the bandwidth.
It's an incredibly effective strategy. But this control of the network also creates some really weird dilemmas for state sovereignty. The book talks about secessionist movements.
Oh, the virtual statehood concept.
Yes. Think about Basque separatists or Abkhaz nationalists, or even groups like the Republic of Texas.
In the physical world, they can't match the military power of the host nation to hold actual land.
But what if they declare a virtual state online? They issue digital passports, they create a digital currency, they set up parallel institutions in the cloud.
Which sounds harmless until you realize it siphons economic loyalty away from the physical state. The authors point out that declaring virtual statehood would almost certainly be treated as an act of treason in the physical world. The physical state will send real police to arrest you for your virtual secession.
Because the state cannot tolerate a competing authority. And this tension naturally escalates into our next section: cyber warfare, proxies, and the Code War.
Let's define cyber war first because the term gets thrown around a lot. The authors quote Richard Clarke, the former U.S. counterterrorism chief. He defines cyber war strictly as actions by a nation-state to penetrate another nation's computers or networks for the purposes of causing damage or disruption.
So not just stealing an email, but actually breaking things.
Exactly, and the text gives some stark historical examples, like the Russian hackers who basically shut down 80% of Kyrgyzstan's entire national bandwidth.
Over a dispute regarding a military base or an investment deal, they just flipped the switch and crippled the country virtually.
Or the massive Chinese cyber attacks on Google and other Western companies focused purely on corporate espionage.
What's fascinating here is that the authors call this era the Code War. It's the digital equivalent of the Cold War. It's this perpetual, simmering conflict that rarely crosses into kinetic violence.
And the reason it stays simmering is because of the attribution problem. Traditional warfare has clear attribution. A missile flies from point A to point B.
But cyber warfare lacks that. An attack might hit a U.S. bank, and the IP address says it came from Brazil. But it was actually a North Korean hacker bouncing their signal through a hijacked Brazilian server.
You can't shoot back if you don't know who fired. And that completely shifts how espionage works. We aren't relying as much on embedded moles and dead letter drops in dark alleys anymore.
No. Human intelligence is being replaced by worms, zero-day exploits, keylogging software, and location-based tracking on your phone.
It also creates the perfect environment for war by proxy. The text outlines scenarios where, say, the U.S. doesn't send agents to fight drug cartels directly. Instead, they covertly fund and equip Latin American governments to electronically attack the cartel's digital financial networks.
A cyber attack is truly the state's perfect weapon. It is incredibly powerful, it can be customized to a specific target, and it gives the state absolute plausible deniability. Smaller states can punch way above their weight class because the attacks are basically untraceable.
But there is a dark side to all this connectivity that goes beyond states. And that brings us to Section 6, extremism, conflict, and virtual reconstruction. Because the internet obviously provides incredibly dangerous information and organizing tools to extremists.
It does. But the authors make a really crucial point here. It's a double-edged sword for terrorists.
Why is that?
Because terrorists inherently rely on secrecy. But living and organizing in a digital world means interacting with the network. And you cannot interact without leaving a metadata footprint.
Right. As the authors note, if they are online, they can be found. And if they can be found, so can their entire network.
Exactly. You might encrypt the message, but the metadata still shows who you talked to and when. And in active conflict zones, the warfare immediately bleeds into the digital infrastructure.
Yeah, the text talks about how bringing down a rival's YouTube channel or hacking their financial portals is a primary military objective now. They cite pro-Serbian hackers who immediately targeted NATO's digital infrastructure during the Kosovo conflict.
But here's where it gets really interesting. In the middle of all this digital fog of war, how do you know what's real? The authors introduced this concept of virtual monitors.
I love this idea. They describe them as the Red Cross of data.
Right. So instead of physical doctors on the battlefield, you have groups of honest, neutral engineers and journalists. Their job is to verify digital narratives in war zones to combat state misinformation.
Because you're going to have deepfakes and recycled videos flooding the zone. These virtual monitors authenticate the data so the international community actually knows what's happening.
And that data is vital for what comes after the fighting. Post-conflict reconstruction.
Which is heavily digital now. The book looks at failed states like Somalia. They had a complete collapse of central government, but private telecom companies stepped in and filled the massive institutional gaps.
They provided mobile banking, communication, and even the electricity needed to run the network.
And it connects these broken regions to the global market, creating what the authors call a business diaspora.
Which is a beautiful concept, honestly.
It really is. They give the example of a computer science student in Indiana who writes a game in his dorm room. By totally random chance, the game becomes a massive hit in Sri Lanka.
And suddenly, this kid in Indiana is deeply financially invested in the stability of Sri Lanka. He builds virtual kinship with his users. He might start investing his profits into local Sri Lankan tech startups.
It drives reconstruction through these massive, overlapping online markets, completely bypassing traditional borders.
So we are looking at this incredible dual reality.
Yeah. And to summarize this for you listening, we are really witnessing a tale of two civilizations. You have the virtual world, which offers an escape from traditional state bottlenecks and opens up entirely new economic lives.
And then you have the physical world, which is still imposing rules, physical borders, and real-world consequences.
And the crisis in perception, the big mistake we make, is viewing all this tech as just neat gadgets. It's not. It is a fundamental redistribution of power.
We are entering a new social contract. We are trading our physical privacy and anonymity for virtual empowerment and utility.
And I want to leave you with one final, frankly chilling concept that is extrapolated directly from the author's text. We've all heard of mutually assured destruction in the physical world, the nuclear threat that kept the Cold War in check.
Right, if you nuke us, we nuke you.
But the book describes the digital equivalent of this, a mutually assured publication pact.
Oh, this is wild.
Imagine a terrorist group or a rogue intelligence element. They get their hands on highly sensitive, devastating data. Maybe the physical addresses of every undercover agent in the field. They encrypt that file, and they divide the mathematical key among their members around the world.
And they set a dead man's switch.
Exactly. The pact is this. If any single member of our group is attacked or arrested by a state in the physical world, the remaining members will combine their keys, and they will release that devastating, unredacted data to the entire world simultaneously.
It uses extreme transparency as a weapon of mass destruction.
Which leaves us with this question for you to mull over. If the ultimate weapon in the physical world is the nuclear bomb, is the ultimate weapon of the digital world simply the forced, permanent transparency of our deepest secrets?
That is a lot to think about the next time you log on.
It really is. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. We encourage you to ponder how you are navigating your own overlapping physical and virtual worlds. And until next time, keep questioning the systems around you.